thank you so much for having me today on Earth Day. I'm really excited to give this presentation. It is my first time giving this presentation, so thank you for your patience with it. Um, Recompose is the company I work for currently. As far as a little bit of a history, I'm a licensed funeral director. Along with that, I have 3 other state licenses that support it, as well as some certifications. Like I've done a 5-year embalming internship, crematory operator certification, advanced healthcare directive certification. I'm a life insurance licensed person and a notary, and most recently, a natural organic reduction operator state license. So that's the newest one that I've added to the portfolio. I've been in mortuary for 15 years currently, and I transitioned into mortuary from healthcare. Along the side of all of that is my passion for flowers. So I'll do floral design and events and things like that around that. But you'll be able to now learn a little bit more about one of the newest options for death care in the industry, which is human composting or natural organic reduction. Some companies also call it terramation. It's fairly new, so you'll hear it called different things depending on where you are seeing it. So as far as the presentation, I'll give a brief overview of most of the options available to us today for what to do with our bodies. And then from there, I can deep dive a little bit more into Recompose, its history, how it came about, the CEO and the founder, Katrina Spade, and then dive a little bit deeper into human composting and the science behind it. And then we can wrap up with a little Ask Me Anything AMA style at the end of it. So we shall begin. So on the screen here is the company's logo and the name, Recompose. The website is recompose.life, and they're all about ecological, earth-friendly death care. The actual whole process is considered to be a biomimicry method, which one of my heroes, the author of the book Biomimicry, started a whole institute around it to help teach humans how to pay attention to nature first before developing tools or technology that works with the earth instead of destroying it. And so this is one of the inspirations behind the whole design with human composting. So here on this screen, I kind of list what I said in the overview. So we're going to look at death care options. We're going to look at Recompose and its history. We'll talk a little bit more about NOR, natural organic reduction, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up with some AMA questions. So here on the first screen are at the top, the more well-known methods for taking care of our bodies. So one of the oldest ones that everybody knows about is burials, and those are the ones most commonly in movies. You see all kinds of different types of burials, traditional with, the casket and the pallbearers. There's also green burial cemeteries where they'll let you just put someone straight into the ground without having to have like the cement liner and the casket. I am licensed in Washington State, and so I'll preface that all of this knowledge comes from that state education and licensing. Every state does have its own laws. Within that, certain cemeteries can have their own rules and regulations as well. So bear in mind, all of this is coming from one of the Northwest states. And then crypts and mausoleums. So sometimes with burial, it will be like in a casket, full body, but instead of being under the ground, it'll actually be in a wall or in an above ground type of cemetery structure. So those are some of the most common types of burials. With cremation, that's generally done by fire and a retort. That's the name of the really big kiln, pretty much, that the cremations happen in. The temperatures, at least with the crematories that I operated, would get usually between 1600 and 2000 degrees. And then at the end, you'll process the bones, pull out the metal, and create what is known as the ashes that go into urns. There is one place I discovered a few years back, randomly searching with the Google speaker, where you can actually have an open air pyre cremation, like off the movies. It's in Crestone, Colorado. One of the funeral directors that I work with currently actually worked there for a little while. And it's really niche, really hard to actually be able to be like on a pyre cremated there, but it does exist. I think that's the only one that I could find where that was legal in the US currently. So some of the newer ones, at least in our state, that are now options, one is called alkaline hydrolysis, and that is water. And so they use some chemicals to dissolve in a metal like container cylinder, and someone rests on a little like mesh net in the middle of it while the water gently swirls around to get rid of all the soft tissues. And then that also leaves the bones and the metal implants and things like that afterward to reduce down, similar to how you do it with cremation and fire. It's just with water in that instance. And then the very last but not least is the only one that the current funeral home that I work at now currently does, which is NOR, natural organic reduction, where we literally are composting, same as in the backyard, but we're putting a person in the middle of all the natural material. And so the microorganisms help get all the soft tissues off at that point. At the end, we also have to process down the bones, put it back into the soil, pull out any metal or other types of implants as well. So all of the reduction ones, water, fire, and composting, do share that similar bone reduction and pulling out of the inorganics at the end of it. The two that I know about that I didn't put on here because technically they are options with things that you can do with your body afterward. I was going to see if anyone wanted to see if they could think of the ones that are not listed here. So now is a perfect time to like go ahead and take yourself off mute and see if you want to take a guess at some of the other ones.
I have no idea.
I
I
say
kind of
burial at sea. Like the
burial.
pirates.
That's a good guess.
What was it? I'm sorry.
Burial at sea, like the
Let's
pirates.
see.
That's legit.
Yeah, I don't know if they do whole bodies. I know you can be scattered. You can also be have the ashes like placed into artificial coral reefs that like one company actually makes to help restore reefs. And so they'll like stick the urn into this coral reef thing and then stick the reef out at the sea and they time it.
Wow.
There's also some where the urns can be shot into space, and there's also some where they can put them into fireworks.
Wow.
Yeah. So the one that I didn't put on here was that you can donate your body to science. And
Right.
so a lot of times, if people have like a certain type of, rare brain thing or something like that, to help the family and future generations, they'll partner to like donate to science for the research. Sometimes families that don't have enough money will also do that because the programs will pay for the mortuary side of things after they're done with, whatever type of science research they're doing. And the last one that I found out about when I was taking my continuing education requirement credits and learning about alkaline hydrolysis, I was looking up on YouTube what the machines look like that do that. And part of the stream feed that it brought up was a company where you can cryogenically freeze yourself. And so some people were paying more to get their whole body like cryo frozen in hopes that like in the future at some point in time, like science can do something miraculous to give them longer life. And you could pay less to have just your head frozen. And so, so that's a thing too. And it's weird because to me, it's not like a disposition. You're not, taking care of the remains of the body. And it's not just straight like donating to science either. It's like they still have, some sort of jurisdiction or decision making or something. It's kind of like that really weird in between. So as far as I know currently, those are the kind of the summary, the overview of all the current options available today on what happens or what can happen with our bodies afterward. So yeah, I guess before I go into more about Recompose, did anyone have questions on any of the, oops, sorry, go back, any of the types of dispositions?
I have a general question, which is you mentioned what is it, biomimicry?
Yeah.
And I don't really know what that is. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the author of the book Biomimicry, I think it's Janine Brius, if I'm saying it right. This is on my wish list next up for finding an audiobook version of it. I finally gave in and paid for an Audible membership because I was like jonesing for audiobook so bad. She wrote it in the 90s and she's a doctor, has a doctorate, and it was like she was trying to explain how to approach engineering in an earth-friendly way where you're observing the natural systems of the earth and how they solve problems like energy problems or building things or destroying things, and paying attention to what's already been happening for thousands and millions of years before building something. And so like in one of the YouTubes I saw where she was explaining it, she was saying, you know, like a tree, for instance, moves water, like it has roots, it moves water up from the ground, defying gravity, gets water out to the leaves. And so observing things like that before building something that does some moves water per se, you know, like from the ground up, is go out in nature, go observe it, go see how it does it, and then see if you can work with that, work with the earth and the planet in a way that is friendlier to it instead of like destroying it to build your own thing to do, you know, what you want it to do. She, at the time when she was trying to explain that methodology to write a book about it, there was no word that she found that like suited it properly. So she actually came up with biomimicry. So you're kind of mimicking what you see in the biosphere of the world
Mm.
versus like mechanical.
Oh,
Does
that's,
that kind of
yeah, that's
explain it a
cool.
little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
Amy, it looked like you had a question.
Um, a bunch, yeah.
Good, good, good.
I mean, I told you that I think I told you that I did an episode recently on green burial on the podcast. And the alkaline hydrolysis, how I remember it was there weren't chemicals involved, but I mean, either way, like what it was just such an interesting conversation to one know all these ways that, you know, my understanding was there was cremation and there was burial, not to, you know, and not even like it's not something that is, I don't know that people really know that you're like full of formaldehyde when you're buried.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. You don't necessarily have to be embalmed. But every, you know, every state, every
Okay.
cemetery, you know, every place kind of has its own things. So airlines is a huge one for us because we're one of the few operating facilities in the US. There are several states where it's becoming legal now, but you'll see when we get into some of the history that it's still pretty new. So people are trying to fly their loved ones into us to have this done. And even though like it kind of defeats the purpose in some ways, depending on how far you're flying with the carbon footprint and everything like that, it's like they want it so much that they're shipping people to us to have this done. And so we have to try really hard sometimes to educate the funeral home that you don't have to embalm the person necessarily to ship them if it's okay with the state and it's okay with the airline. You can use dry ice and ice packs and stuff like that. So it's a huge learning curve. As far as the alkaline hydrolysis, or sometimes people shorten it to aquamation, is another term I've heard that's easier for people to say.
Right.
At least in this state, they do. It's an alkaline solution, but it helps break down the soft tissues within a shift. So it's not, you know, someone being
Right.
boiled or anything like that, but it is like a certain amount of chemicals that when the water slowly like circulating in the tank can complete the soft tissue degradation in a matter of hours.
Yeah. I mean, still less bad than a lot of other ways. The other thing that I came away with that conversation with was most of the green burial options are so much less expensive than the traditional, you know, burial or cremation.
Yeah, it's impressive when you take away the need for a manufactured box, whether it's wood or metal or anything, and you take away the need for, you know, placing a huge liner in first before that. how just like everything helps reduce expenses over and over and over at every corner. So yeah, and in some of the green burial cemeteries around here, they're not corporate either. They're all like privately owned, and some of them are like owned by the small little city. It's like a city owned plot type thing that's barely managed by anyone. And so we have to get all outside industry people to come to even help dig the hole, things like that. But it's like a, township member, has rights to be buried there. And I might only ever see that cemetery once in my lifetime because it's such a small town. But they don't require the casket and the liner and all that other stuff.
Yeah. And the open air pyre, like that sounds really, really bad.
Yeah,
Very Game of
like
Thrones.
burning trash or
Thrones.
something.
yeah, I have no idea what they put underneath the
Why?
person. But you know how in movies where you see like all the planks of wood stacked up and then they put the person on the top? That's what I imagine. I have not like tried to dig further to find like videos of it or the website for it
Right.
to
I
get
have
like more
I
of a
have
visual.
yeah, I have a visual in my head of like a chimney thing.
Yeah, right.
And this is all just what I know of for our country. I've heard some YouTubes of other countries where they had something similar to the open air pyre, but it was like big birds of prey would like do the job. And there's a term for that I can't even remember as
Oh
well.
my gosh.
Yeah, I think it was maybe India or something. I'd have to
Yeah.
look at that one.
I mean, you can just put them on the road, right?
Yeah.
Holly,
Top of the mountain on road.
I know. How long have you been doing this?
I've been in mortuary for 15 years. I started as a crematory operator and removal technician, and then
Oh,
I
wow.
think within 6 months got my internship to work towards becoming a funeral director.
That's how you started?
Yep.
Wow. What got you there?
I was, yeah, it's always a fun story. And everyone always has such a different answer. So it's a good one to ask people in the industry. I was going to school for nursing and I was working night shift in the ER. And when I finally got to the point where I could go into the core program for nursing, because the hospital kept saying they would pay for it if you worked full time for them, the nursing school said you can't work at all now. Like, we'll only let you into the core program if you're not doing anything else because it's so competitive. And I was like, well, that just bites. And so I had already done like 4 years of prereqs on and off anytime I could get a scholarship or anything. So I ended up like going into one of the advisors and saying, look, I transferred here. So I ended up getting a lot of credits at the first college that, you made me get different credits to get into the nursing program. And I had enough credits to actually get an associate degree. It was like, they called it an associate degree in general studies and arts, but it was all nursing prereqs. And so from that point, instead of trying to figure out how to get through this full-on blocker with nursing school, I started looking at how else I could use that degree, and funeral directing was like one of them, where almost all of the classes lined up exactly with what I would have needed to get that license. I think I had to take like one more English class and one more math class or something like that. And so that's when I took the left turn and said, okay, well, instead of nursing, why don't we try funeral directing?
It's such an interesting, I mean, it's such an interesting line of work. Like, I just think of it as like a special person would want to do something like that. Because it's not, you think of it's like almost like a monarchy type of thing. Like it's a family business, my grandfather did it and my dad did it. And that's why um, it's not something that I don't know. Do a lot of people choose to do that? It's just such an interesting,
Yeah, well, you can check out, there are schools that are accredited for it. The two in my area that I'm most familiar with, there's one like in the Portland area, and then there's one in Kirkland, Washington, a technical college. The one in Portland is a lot older, and I love looking at the walls of the pictures of the graduates on the wall. They have, because it's been around, since like the 50s or 60s or something. So I went to an embalming weekend workshop there where a lot of the companies brought in their products, and then they did embalming where you could like sit around 2 levels, and they had the teachers doing the embalming as well. And then in the hallways, it was like black and white photos originally, and it was like there was no women at all. It was all like, like what you think of traditionally, like, and slowly, like by like the 60s, you were seeing 1 or 2 women. And then fast forward to, this was probably like 10 years ago now when I was seeing these photos, it was at least half women were in there. And so there are those funeral homes where it is generational. I worked at one where it was the 3rd generation took over, and I was hired by the 2nd generation. But there's also a lot of corporations as well too that like anything that says dignity on the title and the name of it is probably SCI owned, Service Corporation International owned. And then there's another huge one called Foundation Partners. So a lot of those are like all over the US and not just family and generations. It's like big corporations. So if that helps speak to the general mix of people in the industry.
Just so fascinating.
I know. I totally agree. It's cool because it's not a world we see into. I think people tend to like not want to think about the topic.
I don't want to think about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And so it's really
we're
cool to just be able to hear about it from someone who is so warm and like it's comfortable to talk to you about it and to get to understand it more. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
oh,
To
thank you.
actually
Yeah.
have the options, like
Yeah.
there's like 2 almost everywhere, but
Yeah. Some of what I find so meaningful in everyday work is the ability to educate and to like kind of take the fear away from it, because you're making things known that were not known, without having to pass any judgment or, impose any anything. It's just like, here's your options, and and be compassionate and caring, because nobody ever wants to have to deal with that. It's like if they're there, it's because they have to be there. And so just to kind of hold their hand through it. Yeah. So Recompose. So Recompose is the company and the CEO, the founder, who actually did the research and worked to change laws to even make human composting possible. So this was not possible prior to 2019. It's that new. And this is a photo. Oh, we're skipping forward. Sorry. That is a photo of the building. So we're in an industrial district, but they worked really hard to try to make it like seem natural. And so part of that was having a local artist like paint all around the building. And they started on this side with, and I don't think they show the other side, but it started with this and then goes all the way kind of like in a rainbow, because it starts from green and then goes like all the way to like all the colors, and tries to make it look like a rainbow, but like where the very end of it is like the dry leaves, like the dead dry leaves. So like the spectrum of life and the rainbow all together. I don't know if I'm explaining it that well. It'd be easier to show you a picture of it. But anyway, you can see some of the bright green leaves here on the front of it in the garden there. And that's the front door. So the first time I saw or came across the founder, Katrina Spade, was actually on a TED Talk years ago, and the first thing she tried was called the Urban Death Project. And the reason that she went on that mission is because she had 2 kids and her partner, and they were trying to like put things in place on paper, like their wishes, and have things set up so it would be kind of outlined and not as hard if something were to happen for the 2 boys to have to take care of business. And so in the pre-planning type paperwork, there's 2 boxes that she could check, and one said cremation and one said burial. And the story goes that at that point in time, she literally could not bring herself to check mark one of those boxes, and was like, there's got to be other options. There's got to be something different that doesn't require me to like put a whole bunch of smoke in the air or take up valuable land, with a headstone, or, dig a hole in the middle of the forest somewhere. And she had heard about green burials. You can kind of see on the right-hand side, if it's showing on your screen the same as mine. That's an example of a green burial, and Amy might actually be somewhat familiar with it. And you can see how they're on the left, where it kind of cuts out of the photo a little bit. That's someone wrapped in a shroud that they'll lower down with a little plank and some ropes into just an earthen hole that they've dug there. So that was like probably the closest option to anything that she would have had at that point in time, when she first was discovering the need for something beyond what was available at the time. And so her parents, I believe, are doctors, if not one, both. And she was raised, I think, more towards the Midwest or East Coast, like Maryland or something like that. But she was talking to friends and family, and they were encouraging. And so the very top right-hand picture that shows that swirl and that kind of like graphic up there, that if you go to YouTube and you like Google Katrina Spade or Urban Death Project, you'll see her TED Talk on it. But originally that was like her first try at a company and a business and a concept. And it was like the bodies would like go down this spiral and go into the bottom of the building, and like be composted in that way. I think she closed that down at some point before she spun up Recompose. But in order to help change laws, there needed to be research. And so she worked with, I think it was University of Washington or Washington University. I get those two mixed up all the time. To get 5 volunteer donors that were willing to donate their bodies for the research. And they did composting, and they monitored the chemicals and tested for pathogens and tested for temperature, and based it on the fact that farmers actually do this with livestock. So there's a complete precedence for it already happening. It's just with like cows and horses and things like that, which are even bigger than us, but they've been doing it like as a norm for a very long time. And so they put the research into it, got the science behind it. And then from there, then it had to become laws. So they had to get laws changed. So in 2017, she met a local rep, and I heard that it was actually someone that lived in her neighborhood too. I'm like, did you like buy a house in that neighborhood because you knew? But they got the bill introduced into the Senate in 2018. And then in 2019, Washington was the very first state to legalize human composting. So at the same time, when human composting, or NOR, natural organic reduction, became legal, that's in our state anyway, when they also made it legal for the alkaline hydrolysis or the aquamation to be legal as well. So I remember seeing some of these photos and some of the local, mortuary newspapers. So that's, and I didn't even realize she was the one from the Urban Death Project and this one for Recompose until like a month or two into working at the company. But they started up in 2019, and then the law went into effect in 2020 in May, and they received their first client, I think, on winter solstice in 2020. So that was the very first legal human composting case here in Washington, was in 2020. And then since then, and you can track on our website too, there's an area where they try to keep up and track with all the states where it's legal, and sometimes where it's operational too, because first it becomes legal and then you have to put policies around it. So there's the law, and then there's the, the policies and the, all the supporting how-tos that go with the you can. And then from there, people have to build the businesses and the equipment and everything to actually make it operational. Any questions currently before I go forward? Good. All right. And so that's Katrina. She's holding one of our specialty containers. They've worked really hard to try to keep it as simple as possible. So they do not offer a wide variety of containers and urns and things like that. You can get it in this little specialty container is what they call it. Or I'll show you the bags, then I'll go back. Those bags right there. So those are the only two sizes that you can get is the big 20-pound bag or little tiny one. But skipping back. So
Big difference.
sorry.
That's a big difference, that huge bag or that
I
tiny.
know, I know.
That too.
I think the customers would honestly love more retail options. I think she just comes from academia and it's like the
No, I love this simple idea. It was just so funny, like this 20-pound bag or this tiny little.
yeah, one or two.
Sure.
And each person, so part of the art and the science, so each person produces between 25 and 45 on average of those 20-pound bags.
Whoa.
Yeah, so here's where it talks and shows with the symbols. So you have the microorganisms and we mix, we call it feedstock, but we try to not call it that too much when we're talking to customers because we don't want them to feel like we're saying you're cattle. But it is feedstock, like it is a mix of wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. So we mix that together and then all the microbes start naturally breaking it down. And so the heat starts to rise. So we normally have to start that at least a day or two before we're going to place a person in it. So they show the person there. And then once the person's placed in there, I think it's like 5 to 7 weeks for that initial process. And in the end, everything is pretty much soil, but we do have a point where we separate out between the active composting when the temperatures start to decrease and don't go up anymore. They'll pull the bones out, they'll pull any of the implants out, reduce down the bones, put them back in the soil and let it cure for a little while as well. But then from there, there's 3 options people can choose. And one of them is you can donate the soil because there is so much soil. So sometimes people don't have a place for all of it. You can pick it up, which is totally free. We can bag it up if you want in those bags, and you can buy the specialty containers if you want. Or we can get quotes for people if they do want it shipped somewhere. But then the little flower on the right-hand side symbolizes what people usually use it for after that, which is a lot of times like farms or communities, or if they do donate it, there's at least 3 or more land conservation and restoration companies that we work with in the area. So here's the straw, and the wood chips are towards the front, and I don't think they have any alfalfa in this one, but it shows the soil in the far back there because it comes out a real dark, rich, moist soil there. So yes, we lay the body into the cradle. So we use cradles, metal cradles, and I think they showed, yeah, right here. So I'll have a funeral actually on Thursday coming up, and so the family wants to do the symbolic placing of this cradle into one of the vessels. And so when we do it for real in the back in the greenhouse, we take the foot end off of the cradle because there's rollers underneath it, and we roll the person into one of the open vessels, and the bottom half of it has been lined with the feedstock where it has already started to heat up. And so we'll roll them in and place them on top of it and do a little welcoming ceremony where we try to say something nice and meaningful and specific to that person or what we know of them or their family. Families can send us music, we'll play it, or give us something to read, or sometimes they just want us to place like some candy or flowers or a few printed photos into the vessel with them. And then we'll close the vessel door, and then the top of it gets filled with the remaining feedstock on the top. So the person's like cocooned in the middle of all of it. And yes, we surround the body with material. So that's kind of what it looks like right before we place someone in one of the vessels, is that bottom half is lined with it. And with composting, if you've ever studied it at all, there's a ratio of carbon to nitrogen that they talk about. And so you want between 25 and 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And what they say is the wood chips and the alfalfa and things like that are the carbon, and our bodies are the nitrogen. So that's why for one person, it takes that whole thing being filled, where we'll put the person in the middle and then fill the rest of it with more wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. Any questions on this part? Good. All right.
So how many like do you have to tend to have doing this at one time? Like, is it a big, I mean, that building looked pretty big, but I'm assuming part of that is your offices and everything, but
Yeah. So our staffing, is that the question?
no, like the bodies, like how is it like
How many bodies?
is that space capable of holding like 20 people, 100 people?
Gotcha. Yeah. I think so. We have 2 vessel arrays right now, and I think we have 30 something vessels, maybe like 35 or more. There's room because the metal grids that the vessels are placed into, there's room to add more of them at the top, but I think there's something like 30 to 60,000 per vessel that they have built. We haven't reached full capacity yet, but we're just now starting to get to that point where we're going to have to time things really careful. And they're going to have to teach us how to talk to people about like, okay, well, here's the schedule, here's the time, here's when we'll probably be able to lay your person into a vessel. We do have a really huge, really nice cooler as well that I think holds like 20 people in it as well that we use that has never been full.
I have another question too, which is, do people tend to bring in, because like certain faiths obviously have different ideas about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Are you finding that people bring like priests or rabbis to do any kind of services at the ceremonies?
Yeah, I've only been there for 6 months now. 6 months this month, 5 months, anyway, almost a half a year. So people do bring their own officiants. I haven't seen a lot of the different religions yet. I look forward to that. What I've mostly seen so far is friends or family representatives that want to be the speaker. And so I can't wait to see more of the different types of religions and ethnicities, because those are my favorite. Because, if I wasn't raised around that religion, but I studied it for funeral directing, I get to actually see it enacted in real life. Some of the ones I've seen at the other places I've worked at have been like Hindu, Sikhs, Catholics, Mormons, Indians, like Native Indians. Yeah, just Russians, Ukraine, and they all have their own specific things that they do that are unique to them. Like some of the most beautiful music I've heard has been like the Ukrainian music, and it's like a somber, sad song, but it's like so beautiful. It was just amazing. Yeah, so I definitely look forward to more of that. So far, it's all been just like friends and family. Yeah, so this is the South Array. And then there's one similar, just as big, that's just on the north side of the warehouse. So we've never quite filled up totally. But I think they have, so the bottom 3 rows are the ones that have the actual vessels in it. So this array has room, the very top cylinders at the very top have room to add more vessels up there when the time is right. And those cylinder plates come off. Those are the doors. And yes, 5 to 7 weeks. So with composting, there's 3 phases that happen for the active initial composting part. And then once the temperature doesn't rise anymore, that's when we pull it out and break down the bones and put them back in for another 3 to 5 weeks of curing, where that then reduces the bone even more. The state requires that it gets up to right over 131 degrees for I think at least 2 to 3 days. So that's going to be the second phase, the thermophilic phase. The first phase is called the mesophilic phase, and then after that is the curing phase. So we monitor the oxygen and the moisture and things like some of the other gases that come off of the cylinders. And then when the temperature doesn't rise anymore with any rotations, that's when we know it's ready to pull out to begin the curing phase and let someone else use the vessel. So yeah, we help people load. If they do come to pick up the bags themselves, we'll help load their vehicles with it. And yeah, I think if you ever wanted to see some of the land partners that we donate the soil to, they're listed on our website, but one of them is called ollieecosystems.org. And that's one of my favorite ones because they have such a robust website where you can actually really see a lot of the detailed restoration they're doing for the land. Yep. And then here's their contact information if you ever want to like plan ahead or ask them more information. They do virtual tours, so that is something that is fun. Is they're live, and our outreach specialist is named Laura Cassidy, so you can go on the website and sign up for a virtual tour and kind of see inside the building. And I think sometimes she tries to answer some of the questions that come in through the chat on Zoom while she's doing it as well. And they do in-person tours too that are on that. So, ta-da, there you go. You've just been downloaded with much information. What other kind of ask me anything questions can I help with?
That is amazing.
Are there any restrictions on what you can do with the soil when you get it?
Yeah, so a lot of the interesting part of how it's new and changing, the best advice I give to people is to assume that authorities or agencies or transportation companies are going to want to treat it like cremated remains. I know that some people have been able to get it across the border to Canada, but we don't like offer anyone to try to ship or transport it outside of the US because we know our specific laws. And so some people I think have also been able to get it on airlines to Europe, to one of the countries in Europe as well. But yeah, definitely new, and having to like work to educate industries and businesses all over the place. And one of the things I like that it seems like the CEO does is that she like keeps a heartbeat on like where it's becoming legal. I discovered over the weekend it's now legal in Germany, and it's been around for a few years. One of the things that they require is that all of that soil has to go into a cemetery afterward.
Interesting.
So once you get the soil, are there restrictions on what you do? Like Germany you can only use it in cemeteries. Is there a restriction once you have it in your possession and you get it to where it's going?
Well, it depends on where you're at, I guess. So in Washington State, if you have private property, you can put that on your property, no problem. If you're trying to take it to like a national park, you're probably going to want to get permission. Most people do this without ever checking. Like Disneyland has a problem with too many ashes. Like I read a whole article on it. Yeah. But yeah, it depends on where you're trying to take it, as far as if there's restrictions on it. Most of any of the like diseases or like chemicals and stuff like that, like pharmaceuticals and stuff like that, most of that is eradicated by the composting because it's gets pretty hot, like 130 or so degrees. There are a few things that we cannot accept, and that's like if someone's been embalmed, if there's prions or like something Crutchfield's disease, I'd have to look at the list again to see which communicable diseases we can't human compost. But yeah, embalming is the big one because a lot of times they want to have this really big, elaborate viewing and visitation and everything, and then they want to be human composted. But it's like, I'm so sorry, if you do that, you kill all the little microbes that we need to be able to actually do the human composting for you. So,
Wow, that is wild.
So weird, so interesting. And
What
does
else?
does your
Sorry.
company, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you first.
I was just going to say, does your company do the typical funeral director thing too, where they like help you get the death certificate? I mean, it sounds like there's like scheduling issues that might not be typical of a regular mortuary. So like, do you help
yeah.
those kind of immediate things that need to happen?
We sure do. Yeah, that's a huge part of my job is the death certificate and, making sure all the legal authorizations are in place to be able to do it. The scheduling, one of the things when I was interviewing with them, I went through 4 rounds of interviews, but one of the things I found most helpful when I asked a group of them, I was like, what's something that you didn't expect that has been like the biggest learning curve or the biggest adjustment once you started working for Recompose? And the funeral director gal, she's my team lead. I loved her answer because she actually thought about it for a minute. She asked for the discussion to come back to her, and she said, I think it's the amount of time. So 5 to 7 weeks plus, another, 3, 5 weeks. So it's like usually between 8 to 12 weeks, somewhere in there, they're working their best on refining the process to reduce the amount of time it takes. But she said, like, with something like a cremation at a standard funeral home, a lot of times you're trying to get all of that paperwork to be able to get that cremation to happen like within the week. And with this, it's like a month or two. And then after that is the soil handling, which can take another 30 days. So it's like this like slow motion, long stretched out thing.
I think that's cool though. I mean, I know there's certain religions like they have to be buried within a certain period of time, but I don't think they're going to go a non-traditional route anyway. I kind of like that it's like
Natural.
a healing process, right? Because it's like your
Right.
funeral happens and it's over and you're like, what did I just go through? And this is kind of like, oh, now we're going to do this phase of it. And now we're going to pick up the soil. And
Yeah.
I think that's really kind of beautifully healing.
It's been fascinating. Yeah, when I first started, I was skeptical that like this would be prolonging people's ability to like have
Get closure.
get closure. Yeah, but what I've noticed, and time can change and I can notice different trends as they come up, but what I've noticed is that it doesn't seem like it's too fast. Like people actually are okay saying, okay, I dealt with all I had to deal with, and I can worry about figuring out the soil pickup or disbursement. It's one less thing to have to think about right now. And so I don't want to think about it right now. I'm going to wait until a month later when you tell me I have to think about that part. And they have a really nice lobby and a little quiet room called the Moss Room. And so they let people come schedule time to just be in the building. And that's something kind of cool that I've noticed too, is like a month later when someone's had a chance to actually get some sleep and like get a little bit of their wherewithal about them, they'll want to come back just to be near the person. And even though they can't be like right there at the vessel, they can still be in the same building. And so, we'll offer them water and let them just have their time there. And I think that's really cool. I actually, one of the families that wanted to be there, just to be there while we were doing the lay-in in the back, even though our company doesn't let the families be present for the industrial side of things where the person goes in the actual vessel. They came and they were in the lobby and in the front end. And so I offered them if they wanted to write messages to the person that I could put it in the vessel with the person. And they lit up and they were excited to do it. And I got a clipboard and I got extra paper and pens, and every single one of them either drew something or wrote something. And I was able to put all of that in the vessel with the person. And that just made it for me feel like I could give them something they didn't even know they wanted. But once it was offered to them, like it was so impactful and meaningful and made a difference for them.
It's beautiful.
That is beautiful. Yeah, I mean, we went to the funeral home the same morning that my mom passed away, and I was just like, this is cruel.
Yeah.
This is cruel. So
Yeah.
I love the natural flow and giving some time to deal with stuff. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It just sounds like a very nurturing experience as a, you know, as much as you can, right?
Yeah.
That's wild. This is just so fascinating. Thank you, Holly.
You're so
Yeah,
welcome.
I
I
agree.
am so excited to share Earth Day with all of you, and my pleasure of helping to educate about something new that's coming to the US a little bit more every day.